Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you're watching, and welcome. Thank you for tuning in to this collaboration between Cisco and ITS International magazine. We're delighted to have you all with us. My name's Adam Hill, editor of ITS International. We're the leading digital and print platform writing about advanced traffic technology and urban mobility worldwide. I'll be moderating today's webinar. The title is Shielding the Future, Defending ITS and Roadways from Cyber Threats. The emphasis over the next 45 minutes or so will be on the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts. Our three experts from Cisco Industrial IoT and Skyline Technology Solutions will provide practical help points. You'll hear about steps that allow you to put in place your own plans for cybersecurity. So expect plenty of common sense advice and maybe a few what not to do examples. We all love a horror story. We're aware the topic is broad. Not everyone tuned in today will be at the same stage of their journey, so we hope to provide something for everyone. Right, why are we here? Why do intelligent transportation systems and roadways need defending? What is the cyber threat? One of them is increased connectivity. For example, there is a US DOT plan to deploy V2X technology in 40% of US intersections by 2029. Intelligent transport systems are vulnerable. Vehicles talk to and receive messages from infrastructure and from other vehicles. Cybersecurity includes physical security of the roadside cabinet and the equipment inside, right through to the security of applications such as those controlling the phases of traffic signal. Every one of your units on the ground can be a potential gateway into the rest of your system if it's not protected. Bad practices and non-optimal network and systems designs can lead to exposure. Hackers and other malicious actors don't need second invitations. In this fireside chat, we're going to have a few polls, so please be ready to hit your buttons. We really value your participation. Don't be shy, there's no wrong answers, and you'll find we're quite poll heavy at the front of the session. Just bear with us. That will give our experts an idea of where to pitch their discussion, and your fingers will have a rest later in the session. Okay, let's have a look at the first poll. And this is just to give us an idea of what your main cybersecurity concerns are, just in a word or two. There's no options to choose here, it's open response. Just let us know what's worrying you. So what are your main cybersecurity concerns? Just give you an idea, just a couple of minutes to answer that. Okay, thank you very much. If everyone is up and running, there's some great ones coming through. Okay, we'll talk about some of these. Visibility of the network, state actors, lack of control, safety. Someone's put Skynet. Okay, we'll see them afterwards. Right, so let's find out who's on our panel, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So first of all, Cassie, could you tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam. My name is Cassie McEnroe. I lead our critical infrastructure or industrial IoT team for U.S. public sector for Cisco. I've been at Cisco almost 20 years, and for the last 10 years, really working closely with our state DOTs here in the U.S., cities and counties, traffic engineers, consultants, all around designing and implementing intelligent transportation systems. And at Cisco, really our goal is to help you and your organization design, implement, build a secure and scalable solution for now and for the future, for the future needs of what's coming into our industry. Because as we know, it's changing every single day. Pete, you want to take a minute and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Cassie. Yeah, so Pete Kavner, I'm Cisco's Principal Architect for Roadways Solutions. I've also been at Cisco almost 20 years, the time flies. It's been my privilege to have led several Cisco validated designs in the roadways and transportation space, really where we kind of take the design, build, test, and document approach, working with our ecosystem partners and with very strongly informed by our customer input. And we build those CVDs, the Cisco validated designs, to really help customers get the benefits of the scalable and secure and resilient connection in their own deployments. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Pete. So my name is Paul Lennon. I'm the CTO of Skyline Technology Solutions. And just for the person who answered, we are not to be confused with Skynet. That is not us. At Skyline, we have been supporting technology needs of US-based departments of transportation, including roadway operators, transit, port, air, for over 20 years. Our mission is to build a more resilient and connected society. In pursuit of this mission for our customers, we provide design, build, and operations services that range from infrastructure, such as fiber deployment or wireless deployment, to communications architecture and application development and deployment. Our philosophy is to empower the safety and mobility across systems while ensuring the availability and cybersecurity of their ITS and other digital assets. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Adam.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, panelists. Thank you, audience, as well, for your poll responses. That gives us all something to play with. We've got some interesting responses, interesting worries. No visibility of the network, disabling current systems, production interruption. The idea of having older protocols for some technologies in the network, lack of control, network visibility. Okay. I'm now in the very happy position of sitting back and asking questions of our experts. By all means, use the chat function as we go along as well, and we'll try to answer queries, maybe offline, maybe online. We'll see how we do for time. Okay, let's go with our first question to the panel. Let's jump straight in with some key insights. What are the biggest issues coming up in your conversations about cybersecurity today? Cassie, let's start with you, please.
Great question, Adam. I think the thing that we see the most is, where do we start, right? Where do we begin? How do we get started? And it really is, it's a journey, and it's not going to be one size fits all, right? As we're seeing, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when we were building out intelligent transportation systems, it was very different. We talked about the advanced applications V2X. We talked about transit signal priority. We talked about pedestrian safety, all being enabled and enhanced through the use of technology. But now those applications, those advanced applications are here. They're here today, and they're being implemented all over the world, right? So I think, the thing that we see, Cisco and our role in kind of helping enable and helping, continue those conversations is, there are very different methods to approaching security, and the different organizations have very different thoughts as to how you should approach security. So for example, right, within your organization, you have your IT department, you have your CISO department, and you also have your traffic engineers, right, who all have a say in how we should architect these intelligent transportation systems, right? Traffic engineers, you guys want continuity, resiliency, safety. IT, you want policy extension, enforcement, segmentation, containment. And CISOs, you want risk reduction, compliance, and policy. And I think, my biggest thing that as I'm having these conversations and working with our customers is saying, make sure that you are working with vendors who can help address and speak to each one of those parts of your organization, who can kind of bridge all of that together, all of the risk reduction, compliancy, resiliency, safety, continuity, extension, enforcement, that can bring all of that together for your intelligent transportation, system moving forward, right? And help you architect that for the future.
Thanks. Paul, what about you?
So I totally agree with everything Cassie just said. I think one of the kind of couple of challenges we see when we talk to a lot of infrastructure operators is a lot of that technology was deployed very much in a standalone fashion. It was never envisioned to be connected to the quote unquote internet. They were dedicated, purpose-built technologies. In the early days, they literally were wired directly to things. So it's physically separated. As the flexibility of an interconnected world has really accelerated the capability of these technologies, it's also increased the cybersecurity risk of these technologies. So that's kind of challenge statement number one. The other component that is part of that is a lot of these technologies, unlike traditional IT, as Cassie talked about, like your PCs and laptops, those get replaced every 3 to 5 years. Something like a field deployed asset that cost $5 million to put up, like a dynamic message sign or a large component like that, is not replaced every 5 years. It's envisioned to be out there for 20 or more years. So some of these systems are already out there. There's a lot of what we would call technology debt. They're systems that were never envisioned to be controlled. They don't even have password management or controlled access to the, say, a dynamic message sign, sticking with that one as an example. So you have assets out there that by definition are just going to be vulnerable. And that's a risk you need to understand, and you need to figure out how to accept that risk and address that risk. The other component that DOTs or rail operators, transit operators, and roadway operators have is there's more and more technology being deployed. The number of widgets, we use the term Internet of Things in this space a lot. There's lots of little widgets that chirp out data and collect information that are very important for understanding the health of the roadway system and the safety and response to roadway system incidents. The risk of that is there are more widgets out there than there are people even in your organization. The scale of this technology is outpacing your traditional, as Cassie said, traditional IT space. This operations technology, we're going to use that term generally for all those roadway assets, they're going to outpace your traditional IT space. So operating how you may have in the past may not scale to the future. So that's kind of an understanding. And that scale is an opportunity, but it's also tremendous risk. And because these technologies, at least in the US, this has been the case, a lot of these technologies have been deployed as opportunistic. There's a construction program to build something, a roadway, and technology was just bolted on as an afterthought. Let's put up a few signals and a dynamic message sign and connect it all. And not necessarily as a poor thought, it's just for that particular roadway application. Again, all these things are now interconnected and they've been spot built in many places. So there isn't a cohesive strategy in many instances for how do you securely deploy it and operate that space. So there needs to be kind of a cultural shift of you can't do like spot technologies, think about architectural deployment of your capabilities. And lastly, kind of just as a general thing that I see in a lot of operators that we've worked with, is there's effectively on the roadway side, there's 3 layers of their technology. There's the traffic management or their operations center, which is where the kind of the brains of visibility of what's going on with the roadway system. There are field assets, i.e. cameras, speed sensors, et cetera, that are informing the state of that space. And then there's this magical middle layer called the network that most operators they just assume it's there. And it just works. As long as I can ping it or reach the device, that's all I really need to know. And unfortunately, the scale of that is increasing. And again, it's the soft and gooey part that potentially could be your biggest threat. So it's very important to understand what this space is, however you use 5G, fiber, lease services, MPLS, all these acronyms. How are you tying them all together in a secure and scalable way? And how are you making sure that they're not increasing the risk of your organization?
Thanks, Paul. Pete, what's coming up on the doorstep for you, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, building on what Paul said, and also picking up on what one of the attendees gave in that first poll response is, I think the protocol level. There's a recognition that the protocol level, pretty much none of it's encrypted or none of it's secured by default or by design, and it's kind of almost on the shoulders of the network and the connectivity systems to kind of secure and encrypt that unencrypted traffic. And to Paul's point, I think that's just very much talking to the legacy of some of these, the lifetime of some of these projects, where back when some of this stuff was defined, security wasn't really on anyone's radar. So you can kind of forgive our forefathers there for that one. But I think when I meet with operator traffic engineers, with kind of CISOs and CIOs, I think what's great though is there's an emerging kind of acceptance of right? So it's not like I'm just kind of pushing on a closed door. You're pushing on an open door. People are very responsive to that because it's kind of genuinely a problem they see in their organization that they'd like to work with Cisco and work with ecosystem vendors to kind of address. So I think that's really great that the awareness of the cyber threats and attacks are there. A lot of them have their own, private, not to be shared horror stories about where they have had things go wrong and they have had compromises of their systems, and none of them are proud of it. But every time, no surprise, it's a wake-up call for them, right? And they kind of use that as a catalyst to kind of take some action and stop it happening the next time round. I think, Paul mentioned it kind of all starts at the traffic cabinet, starts at that kind of roadside asset. I think the roadways industry is unique in terms of even other transportation industries, rail or whatever similar, but they have a lot more physical security. They often have, big high fences with razor wire and a lot of cameras. I mean, literally with a road traffic cabinet, it's there on the street where the general public are walking by. I think we're uniquely exposed in this industry that our branch offices literally got people walking right past our branch offices every day, and it's important that we think about these cabinets as effectively an extension of our corporate network that needs to be equally as secured as if it's in the office I'm kind of sitting and talking to you from now. So, I think that's really important. And what's also driving as another catalyst to change, Adam, is, it's great that the operators themselves have an inherent kind of sense that they need to kind of change, but it's also good at the same time that they're being pushed in the right direction by the legislator. And certainly, we've seen that with the TSA mandates in the US and then NIS2 in Europe and similar kind of, drives in other parts of the world, where the governments at the federal level and at the national level, basically saying, hey, FYI, you guys are critical infrastructure, you really need to kind of take this seriously now. Here's some frameworks and stuff we're putting in place, and we're going to start to hold you accountable to those. So it's all heading in the right direction.
Thanks, Pete. That sounds encouraging. One of the interesting things about the first poll we've just done is that it's the range of responses. We're going from public safety, which is clearly such a key priority for all transportation agencies, through to the underlying technology protection that needs to be in place to support that safety. So, I mean, it's a nice range. Okay, we're going to have another poll. If we can go straight to that one, please. And this is talking about what we're calling cyber hygiene. So what is your current level of cyber hygiene? In other words, what basic measures do you have in place to secure your assets? And you've got 4 choices this time. So if you can just, if you could click on one of those, please, that would be very helpful. Thank you. And we'll circle back to some of those answers as we go. Okay, we've outlined some of the high level issues. So let's delve down into the detail. And just for our experts, what would you recommend as the first steps for anyone who's contending with all the issues that we've just been talking about?
I can take a stab at that, Adam.
Thank you.
So I think from our perspective at Skyline, we think that actually understanding where you are is really the most important part. If you don't understand your cybersecurity posture, good luck protecting yourself. And that's the unfortunate reality. And there are ways of doing things like, am I changing my passwords or turning on certain settings and so forth? But you really want to have a structured approach to that. And in the US, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, has several guidance of something called 853. There's several frameworks that are very good for having a structured way of assessing the cybersecurity posture of your organization across lots of different domains. We have developed effectively something relative to transportation. NIST is mostly around IT. They do have something around something called industrial control systems, which is very similar to the roadway operator infrastructure. But effectively, this looks at things like, do you have the ability to identify your risks? Are you protecting your environment? Can you detect when something has gone bad? Do you have the ability to mitigate those errors? And lastly, if something bad happens, how do you recover from that? So that's effectively the functional areas of this framework. And there are many pages of questions and things that an organization would need to kind of review to kind of do a mature way of doing this. Last part is a governance model. And I think we kind of hinted to this earlier, but I'll kind of bring it up here as an example. It is impossible to be absolutely secure. There is no such thing. There is no such thing. So just understand this is not you do this thing and you're done. What you're doing is you're understanding your risk, and governance is about understanding your risk and making decisions around what are you going to control, where are you going to invest in controlling, and what are you willing to just accept as a known risk. So that's a part of all of this is basically how do you understand where you are and where you potentially need to invest. And kind of there's another body here in the US called the Center for Internet Security. They publish something called the top controls, and the top two controls are, do you even know what you have? And it's basically what hardware assets you have out there and what software do you have deployed out there. So just from a priority perspective, and it may sound silly, I know I've kind of mentioned, do you even know what you have? But one of the things that we see when we work with roadway operators, very often when we go and digitally assess their infrastructure, we find anywhere from 20 to 50% more assets than they realized they had. And as I mentioned earlier on in the meeting, what many of them are tracking are things like, where is that dynamic message sign? I have 10 of them. I have 50 cameras or 1,000 cameras. Not what is all this connectivity magic? Because those are assets too. So all of the assets are really important to understand and kind of the configuration of those assets. And lastly, there are some assets as you kind of assess that you need to understand you just have a risk. And I'll give you an example from a roadway operator. I'm not going to mention names. Has a tunnel. They had a tunnel and they had an HVAC control system for that tunnel that was built, I think, 25 years ago now. The operating system that the control system was running on hasn't been supported in about 15 years. And the vendor that actually built the software no longer exists. That is a very significant concern. Replacing that system is extraordinarily expensive. So they have to make a decision. Do I want to have this connected to, quote, the internet? And then that's effectively a question. So there are ways of doing it without actually doing a lot of technology smarts. Just bifurcate your risk, which is one of the elements that kind of Cassie mentioned in her intro, this idea of segmenting your infrastructure. It's basically referring to what things should connect to what things and what should not, and making sure that you have an infrastructure that supports that strategy that you're looking for.
Thanks for that, Paul. Pete, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I see very similar things to Paul in my interactions. It's equally common in my experience for customers to both under and overestimate how much stuff they've got plugged in and connected. Inevitably it's the what's your inventory? Well, it's an Excel spreadsheet or a set of Excel spreadsheets, right? And of course they're instantly out of date, and stuff that's maybe been retired or broken or unplugged still shows up on their Excel spreadsheet. So they're actually expecting to find more out there than is actually out there, right? It's kind of interesting that it goes both ways. I think just to build back on that point of segmentation, unfortunately, a lot of roadways operators have one network segment, if you will, which is effectively no segmentation at all. And again, in terms of how you might get started, well, even if you just add another network segment to go from 1 to 2, you've 100% improved your network segmentation. And honestly, when we sit down and do maybe a design session with customers, you kind of come in and around about 4 or 5 network segments. So it doesn't have to be a huge number, but if you can segment your network into those logical building blocks, which could be maybe by use case or by department or by, frankly, whatever makes the most sense for your organization, and have some good controls between those network segments, that's really going to put you in a good spot. Because another thing really is accepting that at some point there will be some kind of network compromise, even though you've maybe tried your damnedest and tried your best. At some point something's going to happen. If you have network segmentation, then really what you're trying to do is reduce the blast radius. You're kind of saying, but this network segment can be broken, but everything else is going to be okay. An example of that, where we've worked with customers, is unfortunately cameras, for whatever reason, CCTV cameras seem to be an area that is more exposed than others and is the source of more intrusions than others. And so if you can put your cameras maybe in one network segment away from your traffic signals and have very strong firewalling between those, heaven forbids if your cameras do get compromised in some way, the worst they're going to be able to do is break other cameras, right? But the actual signals and the more critical systems are going to be protected. So I think that's kind of important. Getting the visibility, I agree with Paul, and then also allowing the right access in and out of those networks is really important. We've seen some of the challenges of customers trying to do the right thing by allowing vendors in to help troubleshoot, but by doing that they've created an insertion point into the network, which we don't have the procedures to clean up afterwards. That's been an ongoing exposure. To Paul's point, connecting to the internet is just kind of an ongoing exposure. But I'd love to come back to Paul's point of the HVAC systems in the tunnels, because although that was maybe a downside for that particular operator, in other operators we've seen kind of the opposite, where the HVAC systems is actually, that was built to a higher standard of kind of security and connectivity, and that, becomes the tide that rises all boats. And if customers kind of say that's the standard I want for the rest of my, my roadways infrastructure, then that itself drives normally better hygiene and procedures around kind of visibility, segmentation, auditing, all of these things as well. So it's something that I think customers are going to come at from different angles. But yeah, finding the assets, providing secure connectivity in and out of those assets, segmenting between those asset types of the roadway is kind of, I think, the key theme overall here.
Thanks for that. The poll results are very interesting, actually, because I think they reflect essentially what you've been saying, all of you, which is, so when it comes to the level of cyber hygiene our respondents have got in place, around a quarter have got monitoring and password management. Then around 40% have got full detection and remediation. But it's a range. Again, we are talking about this idea of being at different places on your journey. There's a lot of terminology in cybersecurity. Can we have the third poll? And it's the third of 4, so don't worry, your fingers will get a rest. And this is about terminology. And essentially, are you familiar with some cybersecurity terms? And is that coming up now? Yeah, okay. So you've got, again, it's choices. So are you familiar with these terms? Network segmentation, security policies, and zero trust. And while you're exercising your fingers on those thoughts, we'll come to another question. There can sometimes be a gap between theory and reality. So what basic advice can the panel give on how to make cybersecurity deployments successful? Cassie, I will come to you first, please.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Adam. So I think for me, for what I've seen in working with our customers, it really comes down to 3 things, right? The first one is make security a part of your design from the beginning. If you have a fully functioning network out there, and then you're identifying there are gaps, there are holes, there are issues, and you're just kind of fixing the issues as they come up, you're always going to be trying to catch up. Right. So I think if you can implement and design security from the jump, from the get-go, you'll have an architecture that will address all issues as they arise. And so it'll allow you to be much more proactive versus just reactive as things are popping up. The second one is, and Pete and Paul both spoke to this, but you cannot secure what you cannot see. So if you do not have visibility into what is out there, you cannot secure it. So I think that's really, really, really important, that you have to be able, work with a vendor, whoever it is, but that's got to be built into your security architecture. Your security solution is, you've got to be able to see what's out there on your network, because if you can't see it, you can't defend and protect against it. And then the third thing is, which I talked about in the beginning, is do not work in silos. Make sure as you're building out your security architecture and you're on this journey, that you're bringing in your IT department, you're bringing in your CISO team, you're working with traffic engineers, and everyone is all on the same page and working towards the same goal, or all on the same journey. Because if you guys are all working together, you're going to be much, much more successful. And to that note, making sure whoever you are working with, whatever vendor, whatever ecosystem partner or partners that are helping you along this journey, that they all work together. because it's really all about, if everyone is on the same page and everyone, it's very clear and everyone has the same goal, you're gonna be much more successful, if you guys are able to work together versus just kind of building out this security architecture in a silo. Those are my recommendations, Adam.
Thank you for that. What about you, Paul?
So I'm going to kind of add a little bit to what Cassie just said. I think understanding the difference between your operations technology or roadside infrastructure management technology group and your traditional IT shops, conceptually speaking. Cassie kind of hinted at this at the top of the hour, but effectively on the IT side in the US, there's something called that, or something called CISSP. There's something called CIA Triad, which is not something about Secret Service and so forth. It has to do with confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's what the CIA stands for. And on the IT side of the house, they care about confidentiality, making sure that the data is not stolen. They care about integrity, making sure the data isn't changed. And they care somewhat, but usually it's not the cyber people, it's the technology people that care about making sure it's available. That's kind of that in that order is really from a security perspective, that's what the IT folks care about. On the operations side, they care about availability, period. That is the single most important. That's the whole reason why they've deployed this technology is to make sure it's available to support the roadways. So there's a fundamental disconnect between traditional IT and OT. And part of what we do at Skyline is we're effectively dog whisperers between these two organizations. We understand what's in it for each one of them. We understand why they're concerned about what they're concerned about and help navigate that difference. It'd be interesting to understand if you see this in your own organization, this kind of inherent conflict around concerns around security. Again, roadway operators, they by definition make all their data available. They put it on sites so that the citizens can actually figure out how to drive to work or whatever. So they just have a philosophically very different approach to the concern. The other component that I completely agree with Cassie is baking in security. Security for many transportation applications tends to be at the very end, right before we deploy it. Somebody should make a password change or something. It's not philosophically very often thought about, like, as we deploy these capabilities, how do we ensure that we are thinking about security in the same way we're thinking about availability, about all those other components, and having that same level of maturity to that approach. And the challenge is that part that I was talking about, there's a network. It's just like a magical network. I plug in and the application works, but I don't understand I'm potentially plugging into risk if I'm not actually thinking about the overall architecture as I'm deploying these technologies. And last part, this is definitely true in the US, but I suspect this is true in other nations, is there's been basically a lot of technology deployed over time, and it's still in many places managed and operated on a kind of device by device perspective versus an architectural approach of actually managing this infrastructure. As I said earlier, the number of devices is outpacing traditional to IT. Managing it kind of manually is just not scalable. And that's just availability, never mind security. That just becomes a lower priority. And that's the real challenge. So shifting from kind of manual operations, and I'm using that term very loosely, to kind of managing the architecture as a capability. And the risk is many organizations have like the local genius, that's the term I use, the individual that was there since the day the technology was first put out there. It's all in their head. The day that person retires, that organization is exposed to tremendous risk. That's a real problem here in the US. I suspect it's a challenge all over the place, which is, as Pete talked about, that person just has it in spreadsheets. It's good enough for them. So you have to take it from like a person knowledge to the organization's systems way of actually managing and supporting that infrastructure.
Thank you, Paul. Pete, what do you need on the ground?
Yeah, I think what we've seen with our customers, Adam, is if there's some kind of a framework that they can align to, that becomes a great way of them starting to become successful in implementing cybersecurity. For example, I'm working with a national roadways operator here in Europe who is very seriously looking at how they can apply IEC 62443 as a security framework to their roadways operation. It's interesting because that's something you normally see maybe in a utility network, right? Which is great because it shows how we're taking it seriously, right? And that's coming from the customer to me. Hey, help us kind of figure out how we're going to implement 62443. It's not me going to them talking about it. So I think it's really great that we're seeing, again, back to my earlier comment in the session, that it's not like, it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. People are reaching out to Cisco and other ecosystem vendors and partners like Skyline Technologies as well, because they want to go and be successful here, but they know they need some help and they know they need some kind of pointing in the right direction. So things like that are great, and it allows you to kind of measure yourself and kind of measure where you're at and progress through that implementation. I mentioned it earlier about the cabinets. I think that's kind of key. What we're also seeing is what we call this like zero trust proposition of, I'm actually going to assume I'm being hacked. I'm going to assume my physical security of my roadside cabinet is compromised. And with that in mind, I'm going to design everything else to kind of mitigate against that to a greater extent, right? And that's really from the Ethernet port. These traffic signal controllers, these cameras, they're all Ethernet IP connected devices. The default today in the vast majority, I want to say probably like 95% or more of Roadways operators, is if you open a traffic cabinet door, if you see an Ethernet port, if you plug a cable into it, you will get a green blinking light and you'll be on the network. Like, just as simple as that, right? There is no access control, there's no trust model there going on. I think what we've seen, what I've seen personally working with some of our customers, is the big paradigm shift from being default open to default closed. They've kind of really adopted the zero trust mentality to the point that it's now the opposite. If I plug a cable in, I get nothing, and I'm scratching my head saying, why haven't I got connectivity? And that's because there's a bunch of amazing systems on the back end saying, who's this person? What are they doing? What should they have access to? So the default is no access, proof that we can trust you. What do you need access to? Let's kind of set up the configuration to limit that and audit that. And that's amazing, but it's a big organizational shift, especially having traffic engineers kind of come on board with that. But where we've done it and where it's been the collaboration between the IT team and the ITS traffic team, it's been super rewarding because they kind of see the benefits of kind of taking that approach. Turning on firewalling is coming, more common as something that the customers are really kind of trying to do right to the edge of their network, right to the traffic cabinet, having, from an IT speak perspective, what we call a next-gen firewall, really that very fully featured enterprise-grade firewall running on ruggedized hardware in the traffic cabinet. Right, that is kind of, again, we're seeing the customers make the investment there because they're kind of, again, recognizing that the physical security, let's kind of assume is compromised. Let's get that firewalling kind of right at that first hop in the network. So I think those are the things I'm seeing most commonly, Adam.
Thanks for that. We're going to move on to a section where we talk about what not to do, is always useful. We'll try and keep this bit as outcomes focused as possible. We've got our final poll. It's a really simple one. We've talked about it a little bit before. And just to say, familiarity, we asked in our previous poll, the familiarity with various cybersecurity terms, actually pretty good, which suggests network segmentation particularly high, suggests really then that cybersecurity is, and the terminology of cybersecurity is increasingly part of people's everyday business life, which is great news. Okay, let's move to our next and final poll, and it's a really simple one. We've actually referenced it a couple of times because we're going to summarize some of the main pitfalls to be avoided. For example, what should you prioritize? Why is it important to get leadership approval, and so on? So we're asking you if you could vote on this one. Very simple. Are you working with spreadsheets to manage your roadway infrastructure? Yes or no? Okay, and while you're doing that, audience, Pete, can I ask you to talk about some pitfalls? Thank you.
Yeah, sure, Adam. I think that Paul mentioned it earlier about the passwords and the kind of the grey hairs of these systems have been around so long. I think that's part of the challenge. It's not that we can click our fingers and upgrade all of this stuff to new things, because to Paul's earlier point, these are very large capital projects which need to be depreciated over a long period of time. They've got a long lifespan, and in the lifespan of the physical asset, the IT systems behind that may have cycled a number of times, right? And so I think it's great that it's great that you almost get another bite at the apple, right? So, where that communication system was put in at the time of the physical ITS asset, we missed the opportunity there, but now we're smarter next time round. And as the network gets refreshed and as the cybersecurity gets refreshed, let's try and take the opportunity to kind of not miss that opportunity and get in there and upgrade both the hardware, but also upgrade our approach, upgrade our architectural approach to what we're doing here. So I think that's really important. Kind of just my point on zero trust, it's actually a kind of a mindset change. I think as an organization, if we can kind of make that mindset change and avoid the pitfall of we've always done it like this, right? That we've always done it like this pitfall is ever present, and it's an easy one to slip into. I think another aspect is, especially when you're thinking about a large dispersed network, which often these roadways operations are, you're more than likely going to have maybe some fiber-based connectivity in denser urban environments. You're going to have maybe some, it's very common to see point-to-point radio solutions between intersections and junctions, but it's also very common to see, there's a remote county, a remote part of my state or region that, the best I've got out there is cellular. There's no fiber out there in the woods, right? I've got a cellular connection, but I really need to get the critical weather data from that remote weather station to help me have safety on my road system. So given you've got this mixed estate, this mixed set of connectivity requirements, it's also to say, I need to have a consistent baseline across that. I need to work with a vendor that can give me the right level of kind of segmentation, visibility, security, etc., across fiber through to cellular, from urban through to way in the woods, right, and everything in between. I think it's not settling for an overly weak minimum viable or kind of lowest common denominator. I think is a pitfall we can avoid.
What should we not be doing?
I was going to take it a different way, Adam, if you don't mind.
Sure.
From a pitfall perspective, one of the things that so we work with a lot of transportation roadway operators, and one of the challenges especially when we first make contact with the new organization, is understanding, and I'll be kind of loose here, who cares about cyber, and having anybody actually care about cyber, because it is not core to the mission. See previous comment about availability is the most important thing. So really finding a champion within the organization at the right level that goes, this is something that we really need to make sure. I assume everybody on this call cares about cybersecurity. And I'm sure if you think about your own organization, you're like, I wish I could tell such and such to care about cybersecurity, so that we can figure out how to pay down debt in a structured technology debt in a structured way. So that's kind of one of the biggest pitfalls that we see, is how do you culturally incorporate cybersecurity as an important pillar of deploying and managing and operating this roadway infrastructure. Because it's usually people understand that from a physical perspective. You better fix a pothole, make sure that bridge isn't falling apart. All those things are really obvious because they're physical, they're obvious, they're visual and visceral. Cybersecurity is it's hard to understand. I can't see it. I can't see that the gate is wide open. It's not as obvious for a non-practitioner, but a road, there's a big hole in the road. Everybody can tell that's a problem. So that's kind of one of the challenges, understanding who are the champions in your organization, and it may not be who you think it is. The other part is once you have an approach, you're actually endeavoring to improve your cybersecurity is classifying your risk. So this is not a technology question. It's these are life safety systems. These are informational systems. Should these systems even be connected? These are not even technology questions. They're just what is the business we're in? What is the risk profile of the applications we're running and supporting over this? And that'll help inform what kind of cybersecurity technology capabilities, et cetera, you should be putting in place. It's not just let's put up lots of firewalls everywhere and hope that we've secured ourselves. You want to have a kind of a structured approach relative to your risk portfolio. The other kind of, and I think Cassie and Pete mentioned this idea of segmentation, just because I want to beat that one because that's really important. We do see kind of that many of these networks were envisioned as never being connected to anything. So the idea of them being, Pete said, flat or open networks, once you're inside, you're really inside. And just assume everybody's inside. Here in the US, most cabinets have a number 2 key that I can buy off eBay for $10. I can get into just about any cabinet on any roadway operator, and that's pretty common, and I suspect it's the same all over the world. Once I'm in, that's easy. That's an easy step. If you have me, I have access to everything from there. That is not a good thing. So thinking about, and Pete mentioned a term that gets used a lot, zero trust architecture, zero trust approach. And it is not a buy this tool and you're done. It is a methodology, as Pete talked about. It's like, what are you thinking about? How do you, segmentation is a go-to as a part of that, but there are lots of elements of like only things to communicate. Oh, my vendors that support me. A lot of roadway operators have contractors that support them. So they have access to everything or just the things they're supposed to have access to? Like that's philosophically, it seems obvious, but very often, oh, just give them a VPN account and we're good to go. But they have everything. So now they're like a third party risk to you. That's kind of the term that's used. So kind of understanding like how am I exposing myself in different ways? Something that I've seen in some DOTs, transportation organizations we've supported, is those third-party support organizations. They set up their own cable modem to your operations network. It's just easier for them to support you that way. It's like, do you know that? Are you looking for these things? So making sure that you understand like where am I exposed? Then it's develop like your what I call technology debt pay down strategy. As you're refreshing, how do I make sure I'm putting technologies that are actually increasing my cybersecurity hygiene, capabilities, visibility, all those things? And as I'm putting on new technologies, how do I make sure that cybersecurity is at least at the same level of just deploying the technology? Um, and so those are kind of the risks that I see. It's like there's a cultural part to this that then translates to technology and operations and so forth.
Thanks, Paul. That's really helpful. Cassie, could you pick up a bit on that and give us your perspective?
Yeah, from my viewpoint is, I think the biggest pitfall to avoid is just because your process works now doesn't mean it will work in the future, right? So, and what I mean by that is, we know that our roadways are only becoming more and more intelligent, right? We're asking more and more out of them. We want security. We want them to be efficient. We want them to help, move people, transport people and goods throughout our cities and our states, our counties, as quick and as efficient as possible, right? So when you're looking at the future and you're looking at the journey that you're on and how can you get more out of your intelligent transportation system, right? Is that, think about scale. Think about automation. Really make sure you're looking to technology to help you and to your ecosystem partners and your vendors, picking ones that are going to help you manage at scale, picking ones that will help you automate. And what I mean by that is as you're putting more and more technology out there, it's technology, right? So there's bug fixes, there's patches, there's updates, there's upgrades, there's P-cert requirements, right? Making sure that the technology that you're putting out there can automate to handle all of that. Because as you get more and more along your roadways, you don't want it to become a nightmare and not be able to handle just traditional things that you would do with inside a technology network, right? So I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls that, just because it's working now, as you really need to think about the future as you're growing, and you've got a plan for that. So that would be kind of my biggest thing.
Cassie, thank you. That's really helpful. The spreadsheet question, who's using spreadsheets? Well, it's 2/3 of respondents here are using spreadsheets. So I think that emphasizes why having these conversations is so important, understanding what each of the stakeholders need, how the systems can be implemented that meet those needs while ensuring a high level of cybersecurity. That's key. Okay, we've covered loads of ground. We've got about just 10 minutes to go, so we'll speed along. Lots of issues here. I mean, one of the main ones that hits me is, and it's coming across very clearly from all of you, don't wait till you get hit by a hacker. Try to make security part of the design of what you do, and make sure you're bringing disparate parts of your business together. Also, there's alphabet soup here. There's loads of acronyms to deal with. And I think it's also a good point. It's okay if you're struggling with where to start, because as we've seen, a lot of people are at different stages of the journey. So the last quick question from me to the panel is, what are your key takeaways? Just a couple, please. What should our audience do now when it comes to cybersecurity? And Paul, we'll start with you and we'll keep it reasonably brief. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Adam. I think you just said what I was going to say is I've had the unfortunate pleasure of supporting organizations that have been hit and helping them in recovery and incident response. That is an incredibly painful experience for the organization. It's like breaking into your house. You no longer feel safe for the rest of your life. It's very culturally painful. Unfortunately, it's the only time many organizations finally consider cybersecurity something they should be worried about. So don't do that. Be proactive. Identify where you are. Identify technologies for protecting, detecting, and responding to events. Never try to get to the part where you have to figure out how do you recover from this disaster. So that's really the biggest urgency that I impart on this on this group of folks.
And is it too, sorry, and still with you, Paul, sorry, is it too much of a cliche to say you're only as strong as your weakest link?
No, it is not a cliche. I think we've used the word segmentation and zero trust a few times, and it's a really good example. In physical terms, in World War II, the French put up a Maginot Wall to protect themselves from Germany, which is like this big firewall. And basically, Germany just went around it, and it was basically wide open on the backside. That same thing exists in our digital space. Like you think you have a front door locked, and you might have the most amazing front door, but that front door isn't everything. That's just that there's a defense in depth strategy you need to have in place. And things like segmentation are a component of that defense and depth strategy.
Thank you. Pete, how about you? A couple of takeaways, please.
Yeah, I mean, look, to help make real what Paul just kind of took us through, I think you're going to really need a modern communication system to do the zero trust, do the segmentation, give you the visibility you need, allow the vendors the limited but required access to get their jobs done as well. I think that at Cisco we're very blessed to have an incredibly strong portfolio there that covers all the scenarios and all the modalities, be it fiber, cellular, point-to-point radio, etc. Like I said in the introduction, it's kind of been my privilege at Cisco to lead a number of Cisco validated designs, and I think that's a great way customers can get started, dip into those validated designs, even just if you read the first couple of pages to give you the taste of what it's about. We do try and deal with the alphabet soup, Adam. We do try and kind of have the acronyms and make it kind of simple to approach and approach from different angles. If you're coming in as a traffic engineer, more of it's going to be alphabet soup on the IT side than maybe if you're coming at from a cybersecurity engineering perspective. So we're very conscious of that. I would say kind of dip into that material, and I really hope that gives you a sense of helping you do the assessment. How can you plan an architectural approach? How can you set some minimum kind of security features you want in your environment, and how can you actually get that implemented?
Thank you. And one of the things that strikes me as well, you made the point at the beginning, Pete, that transport is almost uniquely exposed, which is really interesting. And I hadn't quite considered it. So starkly. Yeah,
it's funny because I started talking about these traffic cabinets even as micro branches, right? Like if you actually look at the networking of a traffic cabinet, it's got like a WAN component, a LAN local area component. It's kind of got everything going on there. And even we're seeing, for example, operators use things like Cisco Catalyst software-defined WAN, SD-WAN, where they're actually having multiple WAN circuits and using clever network-based policy to decide how to route traffic and encrypt traffic across, be it public cellular or private fiber or whatever, a combination of those things, just as if they were an enterprise customer and a branch office doing the same on behalf of their staff. It's just that in this case, the staff is, a CCTV camera, a signal controller, and, a radar sensor for counting cars.
Sure. No, thank you. Cassie, give us some hope. Take us back. Round it all off for us, if you'd be so kind. Thank you.
I will. Thank you, Adam. So from my standpoint, kind of to summarize, I would say, one of the big takeaways is standardize on an architecture, right? Standardize on a platform, standardize on a technology. Don't make it more difficult for yourself. If you're rolling out technology and then you're trying to manage, multiple different platforms, multiple different architectures, it's going to be a nightmare. Do not do that to yourself. Standardize, standardize. So that is what I would say to summarize. Also, reach out to us. Contact Cisco, myself and my team. We would love to chat with you. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to understand, what stage or what journey, what part of the journey you're on. Whether you want help understanding, where to assess where you're at now, or how to create an architecture, or really kind of where do you go next, right? We'd love to help. We'd love to help have that conversation with you, right? If you are someone who likes to do a little bit of self-study on their own before reaching out, I totally get it. Google is one of my best friends, but welcome to go to, we have some IoT security. There's some QR codes here. You can go to IoT security. We've got more information there. We've also, Cisco, we've got information on our roadways story, our architecture. And then the last one is QR code for you can contact us directly. But like I said, we'd love to chat with you. We'd love to start the conversation.
Thank you very much for that, Cassie. And okay, just wrapping up very quickly, it seems to me that understanding is key. If we get nothing else out of this this fireside chat, you need to know that you've got the assets that you've got if you're going to protect them, and that's something sort of quite fundamental to any business, I guess. Okay, that's it. To our audience, thank you very much for all your questions and your poll responses, and to our panel, thank you very much for sharing your expertise. It's much appreciated. And also to everyone here, thank you very much indeed for tuning into this webinar. A recording will be available in the next few days. And finally, wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and goodbye.